Well, last week we could not do a crossover to Europe, but we're doing so now. German Chancellor Angela Merkel is heading to China this week, and in light of President Trump's decision to pull out of the Iran deal, among others, and the U.S.'s relationship with China so far, let's cross over to Germany, where Thomas Sparrow, a political correspondent with our partners DW, is standing by to give us some insight on this. Thomas, it's good to have you this week. What are the two leaders meant to discuss?
Well, Gifty, it'll probably focus on two key areas. On the one hand, obviously political discussions, both on the bilateral front and the multilateral front, so some of the issues that you yourself just mentioned, and those are going to be the meetings that Angela Merkel will hold with China's political leaders. On the other hand, it's also about the economy, about trade ties between the two. There is a delegation accompanying Angela Merkel. She will also go to a place called Shenzhen, which is described as China's Silicon Valley, to precisely strengthen those economic ties and talk about the economy and the bilateral ties, not only on the political side, but again, also on the economic side. So those will be the two main areas of Angela Merkel's visit to China.
If there's any key significance of this particular trip, Thomas, what will that be?
Obviously, the situation that Germany and China are now, because of Donald Trump's decision, not only on Iran, but also all his trade policies, are roughly on the same side. They are both obviously trying to salvage the Iran nuclear deal alongside some of the other signatories. So obviously that context makes this visit particularly important. It's not the first visit of Angela Merkel to China. In fact, she has been 11 times with this one in China, nearly once per year. But the difference is that obviously in this case, although obviously they will be talking about bilateral ties and about the economy, as I've just mentioned, it's all about the situation with the United States when it comes to some of the international agreements like the Iran nuclear deal, or when it comes to the trade situation. You know that the United States has both problems when it comes to the trade relationship, both with China and with Germany.
What are the political implications of this trip? Nasi already said Angela Merkel has been to China more than 10 times, so this is really not new. But in light of all that's happening so far, we certainly are looking at some sort of political implications.
Yes, we are indeed, and in particular when it comes to the international front, Angela Merkel, but also all the other leaders involved in the Iran nuclear deal have been, at least in the last few days since Trump's decision, trying to talk to each other to find ways of solving the situation, of salvaging this deal. Angela Merkel was recently also in Russia talking to Vladimir Putin. She obviously works hand in hand with some of the other European countries involved, and now she's going to China also to try and hear what China has to say about this, try and understand what China's priorities are. When we talk about the Iran nuclear deal, we're obviously talking about making sure that Iran sticks to its responsibilities, but also making sure that companies that are dealing with Iran or that are doing businesses in Iran, whether we're talking from Germany or from China or from some of the other countries, are not necessarily affected by the sanctions that the United States wants to impose. So from a political perspective, this visit is very important. You obviously stress an important point. It's not the first time that Angela Merkel goes to China. From a bilateral perspective, it is incredibly important, the relationship that these two countries have. But in this particular case, it's not only about the bilateral relationship, it's also about some of the international problems.
Are there any special reactions coming from European leaders or European politicians on this matter?
Well, not necessarily, because obviously this is not an exceptional trip. If you see some of the other European leaders, they're also involved in their own diplomatic efforts. Again, talking about the international aspect, if we're talking in particular about the business side of all this, the bilateral agreement, there have been obviously reactions in the sense that the relationship is incredibly important for both China and Germany, that they have a very strong bilateral relationship, although there are also differences. It's not necessarily all just fantastic now between Germany and China. Germany is not particularly happy about the human rights situation, for example, in China.
Yeah.
Germany would like some elements of the bilateral trade relationship to change, for example, reciprocity in market access or respect of intellectual property. Those are all elements that Angela Merkel will take with her to China to try and discuss with Chinese political and economic leaders.
We'll see the outcome of that meeting, and Thomas will be here to discuss that and get some analysis from you as well. Thank you so much for this information. Thomas Sparrow is political correspondent with our partners TW all over in Germany, bringing us up to speed on what's happening. So we'll be following that particular trip and we'll bring you more.